On Friday, March 26th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $195,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $195,000.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, March 26th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, 100 Youth Empowerment Service interns and 150 temporary workers to be added to the government's service. U.S. and Vincentian legislators hold discussions on bilateral ties and COVID-19 response. And Vincentian healthcare workers among those in a Pan American Health Organization World Health Organization survey on COVID-19 vaccine acceptance. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Roundtable Talk. This evening we'll focus once again on the last Soufriere Volcano. Lots of activities taking place there, and the N.E.M.O is actually preparing for a tabletop exercise which is due to be held tomorrow. We have back with us our lead scientist, Dr. Professor Richard Robertson. Welcome back. You've been away for quite a while. We're glad to have you back, and also the director of N.E.M.O, Miss Michelle Forbes. I'm going to start with Professor Robertson. You've been off for quite a while, off but really not off, because you're always at work even though you're not on island. What has happened? What has changed now that you're back on the ground as a lead scientist? What's new?
Well, I think most people know the dome has gotten bigger as expected. The last estimates that we had indicated that it's now about a little bit close to twice the size it was, probably more than twice the size it was when I was here last time, for example. I was here at the end of January, and it was bobbing around 4 or 5 million cubic meters. Now it's 13.1 last time we checked. Last time it was kind of something that we could still say call a dome, but right now it looks more like almost like a lava flow in a sense, because it's extended so much. Last time it was, I think, less than about 200 meters across. Now it's 900 meters in length from one side to the next. So it stretches now from around the Larakai Gap all the way to the place where the fumarole is on the pre-existing dome. So it's continued to grow. And despite its large size, the rate of growth is still about 1.9, about 2 cubic meters per second. So its overall rate of growth hasn't changed from since it started to come out, but it has continued to fluctuate. It goes up, sometimes it goes to about above 2, sometimes it's come down to about 1.5 cubic meters per second. So this continues to do the same thing in terms of it being a effusive eruption. In terms of, but it has, and I think people would have started to feel events recently, and we could probably talk about that some more. There have been some slight change overnight virtually, where it's yesterday morning and in fact ongoing up to now, we've now started what we might call proper earthquakes. Up until now, really, most of the seismicity or most of the earthquake activity you had from this volcano was really related to the dome building itself up, or what we call dome emplacement events. So you had magma coming out and oozing out, and as it oozes out, it's solid rock. Because it's solid rock, because it's moving, it has gas and things like that. All of those generate seismic signals, and the seismic signals don't have a lot of energy, so they don't get very far. So these signals, these seismic events, these dome emplacement related seismic events were only captured by the station very close, the seismic station very close to the volcano. But late yesterday, in fact, early yesterday, we had a small swarm of events, and then late yesterday evening, we started to have proper earthquakes, proper what we call volcanic tectonic earthquakes, which are earthquakes associated with more rock breaking and magma trying to get through from below the ground, not something at the surface. And these tend to have a little bit more energy, and therefore they tend to be large in magnitude. They tend to be detected by more stations. So we having them detected not just by the closest stations, but further afield. And because they have more energy, because they're bigger, it's possible that they're being felt. And some of them, we have reports, have been felt by people on the volcano itself. So that is one thing that has changed sort of in the last 24 hours or so, that change in seismicity. And again, it's something that we would have been monitoring, and we put in a network to see, to be able to detect.
Okay, thank you. In fact, we have already gotten a message. Someone is saying that those who are living close to the volcano just felt a very strong tremor.
Yes.
And I believe it came from the volcano.
Yeah. I mean, while I was speaking to you just now, just before we went on, we had the biggest VT event since it started. So we were not surprised. We expected people to feel them. If you hadn't felt the ones before, you might have felt the one. I think it happened, I'm in the observatory now. I think it happened about 10, 15 minutes ago, maybe less than that. Just before we went on, it happened. So yes, that's an earthquake related to the fact that beneath the surface, how volcanoes erupt is that magma, this liquid rock that is coming from below the surface, it tries to push its way through the ground. And as it pushes its way through the ground, there's rock above it that is stopping it from pushing through. And therefore, the magma that's coming through has to build up enough pressure that eventually it pushes through this rock. When it does that, it breaks the rock. And in breaking the rock, it generates a seismic signal that we call a volcanotectonic earthquake that we detect. And these have a lot more energy than the dome emplacement events that we had before. So if anything, the earthquakes are telling us that magma is trying to get to the surface, which we sort of knew before, but this is a clear indication that it is trying to get to the surface. So it's something that we're keeping a close eye on in terms of whether it's indicative of something changing. So is it going to move from effusive to something different? That's something that we're going to be looking at and monitoring quite closely as the hours go by, as the days go by in the next couple of days. We're looking at it very closely.
Okay, magma is trying to get to the surface. Explain that to somebody who...
Right. Okay, so far, the eruption, remember this eruption is going on, so magma is getting to the surface. So somewhere along the line, late last year or even late last year, some molten material, something caused some magma, this liquid rock, I like to call it, which is like, it's stiff like rock, but it moves like a liquid, right? It was there down below the surface, probably several kilometers down below the surface. It probably was there since 79 because this rock, the rock that we see above is cool and it's become solid rock. But below the surface, it's still pockets and it's still pools of it there left over from the last eruption. So somewhere along the line late last year, something caused some of that magma that was there to start moving and get enough energy to get to the surface. So that magma came out. Now, it came out very quietly. Unusually, it came out without causing a lot of breaking of rocks. So it told us that the pathway was fairly well lubricated. So it came, we think, from some shallower source, and it came to the surface, and that's what's been oozing out. Something got it going, it got out, and it's been coming out. Now, what we're seeing now with the VT events is indicative of the fact that more material, probably other magma, not from this particular source, but from deeper down, is also trying to come out. And because of the fact that it's deeper beneath the surface, you could think of it like that, there's a lot more resistance for it to come out. There's a lot more rock standing on it. There's a lot more pressure on it. So for it to come out, it has to build up enough pressure and then push its way through. And when it does that, this magma, it breaks the rock. And that breakage sets up a seismic wave that our instrument detects as a VT event, a volcanotectonic event. That's different than the events that we are having so far, which were just related to dome building at the top. Now, this is indicative of stuff that's coming from deeper down, trying to get to the surface. Now, people would ask, what does that mean? Does it mean that it will get to the surface? We don't know. We have to keep tracking it to see if it's the signature of the signal will change as it tries to get further up. The number of events might change, the magnitude might change. Now, if it does, there is a possibility that it will get to the surface. It will add to what is there now. And because of the fact that it's fresher, it could change the way in which the material is erupting. So it could change it from being effusive to being something that is about a bit more energetic. So that's one of the things we look for. Remember, we were always talking about the fact that this volcano, it could keep on effusing things as it's doing for a long time. It could stop, or else it could go explosive. And one of the things that would drive it to become explosive is fresh material coming in, new material to give it energy. So this, in a sense, is the first indication that maybe that's happening. It's kind of, we have to track it now to see if it's really indicative of that. But that's what it means. So magma coming through just simply means that rock, which is the lava, that when it comes on the surface, we call it lava. When it's beneath the surface, it's called magma. This magma is deeper down, it's trying to get to the surface, trying to find a pathway through. And in doing that, it's causing vibration to the ground, which our instruments are detecting. That is what they're set up there to do. They're set up there precisely to tell us if something like that is trying to come through. And we are then able to track it to see if it gets to the point where it's gonna get to the surface. And that's one of the reasons we have a monitoring network, to try to track exactly that. So it's, in a sense, it's probably not a good thing that's happening, because it tells us that this eruption could go to a stage that we all don't really want it to get to. But also it tells us that the instrumentation that we put in is working, is detecting events that could indicate something else that is more nasty could happen.
Okay, I'm going to ask before we take the first break, Michelle Forbes, is N.E.M.O in any heightened sense of alert or anything of that nature?
Yes, we are, actually, since yesterday evening, when we recognized that we were having more of the tectonic volcano tectonic earthquakes. We started to basically heighten our alert. Coincidentally, of course, we were planning on the tabletop exercise tomorrow to take the agencies through their roles and responsibilities and ensure that we understand. So we have already started contacting the subcommittees, contacting key agencies to know that you need to be stepping things up and be on the alert in the event that things start to escalate a bit. So we're quite heightened at this time.
So is that activity tomorrow still going to take place?
Yes, it will still take place.
So we'll talk tomorrow a little bit more about that when we come back. What exactly does this exercise aim to do, and who will be involved, etc. We'll take our first break and be back in a short while.
Band of the Year winner 2019. I'm urging you to practice proper hand washing to curb the spread of COVID-19. When you're able to wash your hands, use soap and water to clean your hands thoroughly. Get vaccinated today. Protect yourself and be responsible.
Listen to me, and I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right. Man and woman, let us join in the fight. More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, March 26th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, March 26th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. a lotto jackpot of $195,000, a new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $195,000.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, 100 Youth Empowerment Service interns and 150 temporary workers to be added to the government's service. U.S. and Vincentian legislators hold discussions on bilateral ties and COVID-19 response. And Vincentian healthcare workers among those in a Pan-American Health Organization World Health Organization survey on COVID-19 vaccine acceptance. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back, and already we having quite a bit of questions being asked. Someone was saying, on a scale from 1 to 10, how hard would you say the earthquake was? Somebody is also asking, Dr. Robertson, are persons on the leeward side also feeling these tremors, or is it just on the windward side? So probably you could take those two before we go into any others.
Right. So volcanic earthquakes are usually, they can be felt locally, but they're usually not as big in magnitude as the tectonic ones. So the biggest one that we have prior to the one that just happened was about 2.6 magnitude. I suspect the one that we had just now would probably be close to 3. Generally, volcanic earthquakes would be, the biggest ones would be about 3.5, probably, around that kind of size. And these are unlikely. The thing that people have to notice that it's unlikely that unless you really have a really poorly constructed structure for it to cause structural damage to the buildings, but you will certainly feel them strongly if you're on the volcano. So anybody on the volcano itself, that is, so you're talking about communities in Fancy, OVS, Sandy Bay, Orange Hill, all that area there, could feel the volcanic earthquakes because they're on the volcano. As you get into further south, like Chateaubelair, Fitzhughes, Georgetown, it's probably less likely for them to feel anything besides the really biggest ones. Somebody asked about the leeward versus the windward. I don't think there are any communities on the leeward side, apart from the guys in the hills. The windward side, they have a lot of communities, established communities. But the other communities on the leeward side are really things like Fitzhughes and Chateaubelair, which are off the volcano. So they're probably not likely to feel the events, although it's possible that the bigger ones could be felt by some people, in Fitzhughes and in other parts of Georgetown Pass.
Okay, so I'm seeing comments like over the river is worried, over the river is concerned. Someone here is asking, and I'd get a response from both of you. So should we be on the alert for sudden need to move then? Michelle, you could go first, and then
yes, certainly.
Professor will come in.
We at the stage now we have been saying for the last few months we have to be ready for any sudden change, any quick change, and we should be even more heightened, asking persons to really heighten their preparedness in the event that this continues and escalates, and we may have to move into an evacuation. At the moment, we don't think so. We continue to monitor over the next few days, next few hours, but things can certainly change. But we want persons to be at this heightened state of readiness in the event that things go the other way. So we really just want persons to continue your preparedness. If you haven't done so before, this is the time now to get your house in order.
Professor?
Yeah, I'd endorse that. We, in a sense, the Vincent this time around has been fortunate in that this volcano started very quietly, and for the last 3 months, it's been erupting quietly. So people talk about warning of an explosive eruption. the warning that you're getting now is your warning. So if you didn't know in December that this volcano could erupt, you should know by January. You should have known by February, and you certainly should know by March. And just in case you didn't know, the volcano now starts to give you events that are felt, that you could actually feel that something is happening. So you know that you're not just seeing the burnt vegetation, you're not just seeing the pictures that from what's on the dome, but now you're feeling earthquakes. So I don't know, people, what are the warning you should get that this volcano is erupting, that it could do some nasty things. So you don't have to be panicked. You just have to make sure you have plans in place. You have to have a plan if you live in the red and orange zones, and there's lots of information that N.E.M.O has put out in terms of what you should do. You should have plans that just in case you have to move south, you know what you're going to do, and not wait until it actually happens to put the plan in place, or not, I dare say, expect that somebody else is going to do it for you. This volcano is giving you plenty warning. I suggest that you take the warning.
Yep, someone is saying, I understand you don't want to panic the public, but what are the statistics that this volcano can deem effective and can explode anytime? And I think you just explained that the volcano has been erupting for quite some time now. It's really not new news.
Yeah, well, okay. Again, we've said it a number of times that Soufriere is a volcano that can go from relatively no activity to explosive activity within a space of hours to days to months. In 1902, they had precursory activity that went on for years. In 1979, you had precursory activity that probably went on for a month or two, but real exact notification that it was going to do something only happened about 48 hours before. So that's the time scale you're talking about. It can move very fast when it gets moving. Now, things have changed in that we know a lot more about the volcano, and we have a monitoring system in place, and we have scientific staff here looking closely at it. So, and there's plans in place and all of that. There's a lot, we're a lot more prepared, I think, for dealing with it than we were before. But still, we have to respect the fact that it is a volcano that can move very fast if it does. So therefore, we ourselves in our plans have to plan to be able to respond quickly. And that's the main thing. You just need to make sure that you have a plan in place. And if you really are uncomfortable about where you are and things like that, you just need to make a plan for where you need to be more comfortable.
And that's one of the things that N.E.M.O has, in fact, been trying to impress upon people, impress upon families, the need to be prepared. What would you say to families, especially those in the areas, affected areas right now, to reinforce the need for them to be volcano ready? I mean, we know that we live in, that's one of the hazards that we must live with as Vincentians. What would you say to them now?
What you're experiencing now, first of all, is one of the signs that a volcano is you living on a volcano, basically, in terms of the earthquakes as we in this stage of the eruption. And it is really another warning sign for you that you really need, as Dr. Robertson said, if you have not had things in place over the last few months, that you need to. Now, living with a volcano and living in that particular high-risk community, it means at some point that there's a possibility that you may have to move from that community if there's an explosive eruption. What we have been doing over the last few months, over the last few years, 10, 15 years, is really in giving persons the information on how to better prepare in the event of a volcanic eruption. So if you have not made arrangements as yet to really stay with friends and your family, this is the time to make those arrangements now. Because, you know, you have to move from Fancy down to Georgetown, Byra Goss area. You have to move out of those areas, Chateaubelair, Fitzhughs, the mere fact that we have in the current eruption or the current dome building started out on the western side. That's where the vent is. So you need to make those arrangements, know where you are going to go, sit down with your family, have a plan, start talking about what ifs, depends on the time of the day the eruption happens. If an explosive eruption happens, where are you going to be? Where are you going to meet? We have been going through the communities for the last 2 months, informing persons of what can happen and the need for preparedness and exactly where you're going to evacuate to if your particular community has to be evacuated. So this is the kind of information you need to have now. You need to have that, most importantly, that plan within your family. What are we going to do as a family? Where we are going to go? Do we have arrangements with other friends or family in the green zone? And generally the green zone or the safer areas is from North Union on the eastern side down to Kingston, and on the western side, really from Curtains back up to Kingston, and of course in the interior of the island. So I'm really urging persons, put your things in place now. We have had enough time, almost 3 months, to get things ready. The volcano is telling us at a different stage. You're at a different stage now. We're not saying it's going to go explosively. We don't know. But we're at a different stage that we need to pay close attention to what is happening.
Okay, somebody's asking, have we been linking with radio stations in St. Lucia for communication purposes? The fancy area had mentioned some years back that they don't pick up local radio stations as well.
Yes, we have. Just today we actually started some contacts, and we're going to continue that over the next few days. We do have to be careful too, because they have volcanoes that start with the word Soufriere. So once you mention Soufriere in another country, they may think it is theirs too.
There is a Soufriere.
Yeah, exactly. So, they're very cautious of it, broadcasting such information. So they will always mention St. Vincent if they decide to carry the broadcast.
Will helicopters be used in the evacuation process, especially given road conditions and choppy waters on the windward side?
Once, in the event of an explosive eruption and there's ashfall, you really don't have any aircraft operating in the first place. So that is unlikely that will happen. A helicopter normally can only maybe take 5-6 persons too, for safety. So basically, once you have that kind of activity, ashfall in the air, aviation actually ceases, because it can affect the aircraft. I know it's a rotor type aircraft, but different things can happen, and it's unlikely that we'll be using those in this particular scenario.
Okay, because the airspace would be
will most likely be yes.
Okay.
Aviation will come to a halt basically if we have explosive ashfall.
Okay, someone is asking, I'm not sure, would the public know how hard the earthquake was? I'm not sure. Professor?
I'm not quite sure understand the question. Usually for earthquakes, people tend to want to know what's the size of the earthquake, and we do it by using this thing called a magnitude scale. And usually I find it very interesting. I understand why they ask, but the magnitude scale is often meaningless to them, because a magnitude scale really is an estimate determined by various methods of estimating the energy we produce. It's a mathematical formulation of how the instrument responds to this event and how much energy it simulates. So it doesn't really tell you what effect the earthquake has. What people really want to know is the intensity. And the intensity is how it shakes the ground. How do you feel? Now, volcanic earthquakes are usually not very intense. They're going to be felt like a shake, but they're not going to necessarily break structures and damage things like a tectonic earthquake is. So in terms of how you're going to feel them, you're probably going to feel it like you shook, somebody shook the ground, or a big truck passed and shook the ground, that kind of thing. It might be a bit stronger than that, but beyond that, it's not going to be very intense. And the magnitudes, because the magnitudes are usually going to be smaller, as I said, less than probably 3.5 at max, or less than that, or that's the kind of size you could have them being.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll take our second break and come back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, 100 Youth Empowerment Service interns and 150 temporary workers to be added to the government's service. U.S. and Vincentian legislators hold discussions on bilateral ties and COVID-19 response. And Vincentian healthcare workers among those in a Pan-American Health Organization World Health Organization survey on COVID-19 vaccine acceptance. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back. And the questions are coming in fast and furious, but just to let the person who wanted to know about the intensity of the last earthquake, it was in fact 3.1, I'm told. Thanks, Professor, for that. Have persons from various communities trained in the eventuality of an explosive eruption to help facilitate movements of individuals? I know we've talked about this at least on every program that we've done, but Forbes, I don't know if you wish to.
We have been training persons all the time up to 2019, 2020 early, before we had the COVID. We actually did some training in especially in all the communities, red and orange zones, closer to the volcano. So this is something ongoing that is part of our community emergency response team training in terms of evacuation, everything around preparing for emergencies, but also it is up to the individual families to really know how to move somebody if you need to move someone that is maybe immobile or have mobility issues. But we do have trained persons, over 100 persons within the communities over the last 2 years in terms of emergency operations, what to do in a volcanic emergency, and how to go about dealing with people also and evacuating persons.
Okay, I'm seeing somebody saying, so it's every man on their own, and that's not true. People are first asked to know or see whether they have friends and family.
Yes, so we'll keep them.
But there are evacuation centers that will be set up throughout the safe zone. So
that's part of the event.
That's part of the plan.
Yeah, that's part of the plan. We encourage persons to make their own arrangements first. If not, the government as a state always provide public facilities that persons can actually go to if needed. So that has always been.
Not everyone has somewhere to go, and not everyone wants to go to an evacuation center.
Exactly.
But the option is there. Okay, someone is asking, have there been earthquakes before this one? Yes. Has there been an increase in the number of quakes recently? Yes. Am I correct, Professor?
That's quite correct. I'm glad you're getting the message. Yes, we have had, and of course, the kind of earthquakes we have now, we would expect to have sort of more, we have more earthquakes now because they add, remember we're having a new kind of events now, and they add to what was happening before. We were having mainly dome emplacement events. Those are continuing, but now we also have volcano-tectonic earthquakes related to something more deeper. So both of them are going to add to your having more events than you had before. So the numbers would have increased, yes.
Okay, someone is asking, will the water system be interrupted if the volcano erupts? Yes.
There can be, I wouldn't want to speak for CWS, there can be interruptions, especially if there's volcanic ash.
If there's ash.
And there's ash for all that, the system may be shut down to protect actually the equipment, because of course the siltation can actually damage and block up the reservoirs. But I refer that back to CWS, but it can happen.
Okay. How are people chosen for the vulnerable list? I'm not sure what vulnerable list that is, and the question of there being a choice. I don't know. To Dr. Robertson, given that the vent is closest to the southern wall, what is the likelihood that the southern wall could be compromised and a lateral blast pose? Okay,
I got the gist of what they're saying, and it's an interesting question. Yes, what the person have clearly identified is that, unlike in 79, when the vent was more or less central in the crater, what you have now, because of the obstruction of the 1979 dome, the vent is now southwest, so it's preferentially located in a particular part of the crater. So yes, most of the activity would tend to want to be in that direction. And yes, there's a possibility that it could compromise the crater wall, and you could have potential things like lateral blasts and movement, preferential movement in that direction, say. And that is precisely, I think, people would have heard us speak about the fact that we had put in a set of reflectors on the southwestern wall to look for potential failure of that wall. Now, our concern was twofold. Yes, to look at whether the weight of the dome itself, the size of that mass of rock that was now resting on the crater wall, whether that weight could somehow cause the crater wall to fail. And if the crater wall then fails, they have the potential of that hot material that is in the crater getting outside the crater. So we were concerned about that, so we put a reflector there. But the other thing was really generally to measure this, to monitor the stability of the southwestern crater wall, both because of that kind of event, but also because of the potential for other things. So yes, it's something that we would be concerned about. If there was a blast, if there was explosions from the southwestern part of the crater from the vent, there is a potential that the explosions could result in some sort of collapse in that direction. But we would hope that by then, we would have alerted people in sufficient time and nobody would be in harm's way. It could potentially cause a lot of damage, and it could cause, it could destroy a lot of property in that area. But certainly it shouldn't harm any life, because people would be long out of the way before it gets to that stage. Lateral blasts tend to develop in particular ways that if we have, we might get an indication that we headed in that direction before. And certainly people should be out of harm's way.
Professor, is there a scientific reason why quakes are being felt on the windward side as opposed to the leeward side?
Well, I think that's simply because other people live. There's nobody living on the leeward side, unless you're talking about the guys in the hills, and I'm not sure if they're going to be reporting feeling quakes. I suspect they might be feeling the quakes too. If you had villages on the leeward side of the volcano, on the volcano itself, remember I was telling you, these quakes are more than likely going to be felt by people who are on the volcano. And the only communities that you have, formal communities that you have in St. Vincent that occur on the volcano itself, are communities on the windward side. The leeward side, you have farming communities that people live from time to time. They're not really there all the time. So the chances of people feeling them on the leeward side is less likely, simply because people are not there.
Okay, thank you. Someone is asking whether or not mobile equipment and evacuation buses will be stationed at strategic locations to facilitate emergency operations.
Do you mean days before? Definitely not days before. If we have enough information from the scientists that an explosive eruption is imminent, then buses will be deployed. But no bus is going to be there sitting for 2-3 days waiting for an explosive eruption. So we go by the science. We go by what the scientists are saying to us from the Seismic Research Center, and we make a determination based on their advice or recommendations to whether we're going to do an evacuation or not. So only if an evacuation order is going to be given.
Okay, and somebody's asking, do you think that evacuations need to be happening now?
No, we don't have any evidence as yet that we are going to go straight into an explosive eruption, but it is dynamic, it's fluid, things can change. So we need to be constantly monitoring, we need to be paying attention to what the instruments are saying, what the scientists are saying, and that will actually guide our decision. However, if a family maybe not feel comfortable and they already have their pre-arrangements to stay with other families and they're becoming uncomfortable, they can make that one individual arrangement if they choose to.
Okay. For people on the leeward side, isn't it better to evacuate via ferry? Or is there one or some in place to evacuate?
We have that as part of our plan. We actually have to look, especially the communities of Chatterbilly and Fitzhughes, we are looking to have those evacuate via ferry. So that's part of our whole transportation plan under the national system.
Okay.
And I think that some of that was done in 79 too, wasn't it? Isha?
Professor, which side is the new dome growing? I think you may have dealt with that earlier on. But just in case the person missed it, I presume that's the reason for the question. Which side is the new dome growing?
Which side of it's on the southwestern side. The dome has always been coming out from the southwestern side of the crater floor, the southwestern side of the 1979 dome. I don't know if are they meaning if it's moving in a particular direction? It's moving in both directions. So it's coming from the southwestern and it's moving towards the south and east, and it's also moving towards the north and west. So it's moving in both directions. It has always been moving in both directions, more or less. Sometimes it's moving in one direction a little bit more than others, but generally it's been moving sort of a similar kind of rates in both directions. I described earlier on that it now stretches from more or less Larakai Gap all the way to the fumaroles. So that gives you impression. That picture you have there shows you where it's reached now on the western side, and then on the eastern side or southern side, and the other gap shows you where it's reached on the other side. So it's growing in both directions. It's sort of sliding across, which is why I said it's more like a lava flow now rather than a dome. Really, it's not a rounded shape. It's now a lenticular shape. It has more length than height, so that makes it more lava flow.
So that's what we're seeing on the screen now. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So someone is asking Dr. Robertson, are we seeing plans and other initiatives comparative of that during the Montserrat volcanic eruption?
What the extent of the pre-planning in terms of the Montserrat versus St. Vincent? Is that, if that's the question? Well, it's I don't like to use the term. It's like chalk and cheese. It's different. I think in the case of Montserrat, they for whatever reason, they didn't think that their volcano can erupt, and therefore there was not as much pre-planning for a volcanic eruption. In St. Vincent, I think I'm a volcanologist because of the fact that we realized that our volcano could erupt. So I think for a long time, people realized that the volcano in St. Vincent could erupt, and there have always been some level of planning, but certainly within the last couple of years, it's intensified. Ms. Forbes have mentioned that we had this volcano ready project for the last 2 years where we focused on the communities that could be potentially impacted. So there's been a significant amount of planning in terms of managing this volcano in St. Vincent, and it's happened from since 79 onwards. And that's different than most of the other islands where the volcanoes had never erupted in the lifetime as most people.
Thank you. We'll take a final break and be back in just a second.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, March 26th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6, a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, March 26th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $195,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $195,000.
Welcome back. Before the program ends, we need to talk a little bit about the simulation exercise that's taking place tomorrow. And of course, that was planned long before the escalation in what is happening at the moment. Somebody is asking how much warning time before the evacuation protocol will be activated. They're also asking about a ferry. We did answer that, yes, that's part of the transportation plan. How long would it take that said ferry to get to Chateaubriand if an evacuation is called?
Well, it will take roughly, and depends on when you get onto the ferry and where it is. Because if it is Beckway, for example, and it may get there within 2 hours, but it all depends on the location of where the ferry is. Of course, if we see things are escalating a bit, we alert in all of our transportation network at the moment to let them to be on standby, so the event that we have to move persons. In terms of our simulation exercise. I can go straight into that. We have been planning, as part of the preparing for a volcanic emergency, we have a lot of planning ongoing over the last few months, over the last few years, and since the effusive eruptions. As a matter of fact, since we started having some earthquakes late last year, we would have been looking at our plan and seeing where the gaps are that we have observed over the last few years. And we have done a significant amount of work over the last few months, especially looking at transportation evacuation procedures and nailing that down, working with a host of key agencies, the Ministry of Transport and Works, BRAGSA, the police, different entities, and ensuring that our plan is up to a stage where when it's executed, that it can flow smoothly. Of course, you never know what is going to happen. Things can be thrown at you, but at least you have a plan that you can actually work with rather than having nothing. So as part of this process, we had already decided over a month ago that we're actually going to go through now the stages of the plan through a tabletop. We call it a tabletop exercise. It's not a functional exercise. We are not going to move people or anything. It's sitting around a table, but it's mainly virtually. We will have a few persons in-house at N.E.M.O, in the Emergency Operations Center, but most of our audience will be all the ministries of government, all the agencies, right, that have a role to play in the whole national, in event of an evacuation. And of course, managing people who will have to be evacuated from a volcanic eruption, explosive volcanic eruption. And so all of us are coming together tomorrow, 9 to 12:30, having this simulation exercise where we'll have different scenarios, and the agencies have to work within their own agency or subcommittees to determine if this scenario is presented to you, how are you going to deal with it? And that way you can actually understand what is my role in this whole national exercise if we have an explosive eruption, and what are we going to do? This is where you make the mistakes now. This is where you ask the questions if you need to ask questions, or if you don't understand what is your role, this is where you actually go through that now. So this is part of the whole tabletop exercise. Let us learn from each other, go through the various scenarios of the what ifs. What if can happen, what can happen, and how are we going to deal with it as a department, as an agency, and of course as a whole national government going forward.
Okay, so who are some of the stakeholders that would be involved tomorrow?
Tomorrow is the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Tourism, we have the Chamber of Commerce, we have the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Red Cross, we have all the ministries, Ministry of Agriculture because they have a role in terms of the animals, we have the Foreign Affairs because of course there's a role in terms of if there's emergency supplies, we have the Consumer Affairs, the new Ministry of Public Service Consumer Affairs because we have to engage the supermarkets owners, so it's all the agencies of government basically be involved. We have the utility companies, emergency communications part of it because that's one component of the plan that we're going to test. We have the radios issued to the communities in the red and orange zone, and we're going to ensure that we have communication with them via radio, VHF radio.
You preempted my question about the communication network there.
Yes, so we have actually been boosting that network over the last year, and we actually have been using it since the effusive eruption. So we are now tomorrow as part of the exercise. We will actually test that communication with the red communities in the red and orange zones.
You mentioned the Ministry of Health, and I remember early on, didn't get to ask a question. Someone wanted to know how will the evacuation work, seeing that we'll be managing COVID and the volcano at the same time.
Yeah, well, the protocols will apply in terms of wearing the mask, hand sanitizing, but definitely wearing of the mask. That is required also. We also distributing masks to the key persons in the community so that if somebody comes to board the bus that do not have a mask, they will also have a mask. But so that's why we want to encourage persons to ensure you observe the protocols. When you get to the shelters also, you're required to wear a mask, temperature checks, registration, spacing of persons within the shelters will be different than an ordinary, like say a tropical storm emergency. So the spacing will be different also so that you can have that kind of social distancing between the families.
And I'm seeing the whole questions of vaccination being very critical and important. Will we really to have to go into this phase? Dr. Robertson, somebody's asking, in all your professional studies, what are the leading scientific reasons that can trigger volcanic disturbances and possible eruptions?
That's a long topic, but briefly, volcanoes are driven by the fact that this material called magma exists beneath the surface, and the magma, because of its properties, mainly It has to do with its chemistry itself, and particularly with the amount of what we call volatiles or water that you have in it, and how these volatiles interact and how easy they come out. But essentially, the magma, because of its properties, is constantly trying to get up to the surface. And whether or not it gets there up to the surface, what drives it really is the amount of pressure that can build up. It basically have to have some excess pressure builds up within it that then forces it to move upward. So you have to have some what they call overpressure, and usually that buildup is related to a number of things. It's related to movement of plates. It's related to the property of the material itself. It's related to the property of the overburden of the material, the rock that's above it, various things. So what drives it, in essence, is its own structure, its own chemistry, what it is made of, and particularly what determines how it comes out and how quickly it comes out and what is explosive versus diffusive and when it erupts, is to a large extent how it deals with getting rid of the gas that exists in it, or the volatiles that exist in it. If it comes out easily, then it probably invariably might come out and ooze out, if the gas comes out easily. If the gas doesn't come out easily and it pressurizes, then it's more likely for it to be explosive. And I mean, that's kind of a very quick way of answering the question, which is quite long, could be quite long.
Right. A couple of quick questions as we head on down to the close of the program. Somebody's asking, Ms. Forbes, you talk about the communication system. So if the main communication goes down for any reason, is there any backup form or means to keep communicating to the red and orange zone from the command center?
Well, once the explosive eruption is ongoing or has taken place, we don't expect persons to be within the red zone at least. But we definitely will still be using radio. When I say radio, I mean mainstream radio. We're using all the forms of media. So we have those that are internet based that may go down. We still have the whole radio that we can use, and of course the ham radios too that have backup power and all of that. Those still be in communication. When I said communication, I was speaking about radios, different levels of. The radios, VHF radio, ham radios tend to be more robust and can last a while. So that is a particular type of communication we will be using in collaboration with people, the other ham radio clubs within St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we do have backup power in some of those in all of our sites that we're using. And so certainly we'll be able to have some kind of redundancy within our network.
Okay, another question. What is the rough estimate of persons who may rely on government transport from both red and orange zones if there's an explosive eruption?
From our data, 10,943. We actually have been collecting the information over the last few months, and thanks really to the work of the community members, we actually have been compiling and asking persons who need transportation, and that is part of our transportation plan, where persons have actually indicated, look, I don't have private transport, I will have to depend on public transport. So 10,943.
Okay. And someone was also asking whether or not the restrictions on the buses will in fact be eased if there's need to transport people to evacuation centers and to safety.
The important thing will be, of course, saving lives, but still maintaining some of the personal protection that is needed using the mask. But our main aim, of course, is to get persons to safety. Within a safe environment, you must wear your mask at least for sure if you're actually being evacuated via the buses.
Okay, and before we go, the scientific conclusion with regards to the current status of the volcano, and also you'll talk about, of course, what happens next. So you can...
Right, so, yeah. So the eruption continues. It continues to be effusive. That is quiet extrusion of magma forming a lava. We call it a dome, but it really is more a lava flown out because of how it's operating. There has been recent indications that something might have changed. Certainly that something else might be coming through, and therefore there's a potential that it could change from effusive to some other kind of activity. It may be faster dome growth, or it might be explosions. We're still looking at the data in terms of that. Right now, I think it's still the most likely thing is for it to continue to do what it's doing now. But there's an indication that something might be changing, and we're looking at that closely in terms of whether or not, what that change means, whether it means that it's going to an explosion versus faster dome growth, various other options. And as soon as we get an indication, we'll let the authorities know, and I'll be on the radio talking to people and tell them exactly what we think the prognosis is. But right now, I think the most likely thing is more of the same, but don't be surprised if it changes in the next few days, next few weeks as we move forward.
Okay, thanks. And
we are living with a volcano. It has been erupting since December. Our alert level was raised in December to orange alert. It still remains at orange alert. If you want to say we're a bit more heightened now, but we're still at the orange level alert because there's an effusive eruption ongoing. Let's not be complacent. The volcano has given us about 3 months for us to get ready. We're at the stage now it's showing us a different type of activity. We don't know which way it is going to go. But we, as where I sit at N.E.M.O, each and every individual needs to realize that things may change. They can go from one stage to the next, and we all have to be ready to really respond, not just respond, to deal and manage this event, because we tend to focus on the response only. So let's be ready. We have had some time. As well, one of the sciences, we don't have a contract with the volcano to tell us when it's going to explode, but we need to be ready because things can change at a very short notice. No evacuation order has been given at this time. We remain at orange alert, and I want to encourage every person who lives in orange and red zone to really pay close attention to the information over the next few days and next few hours, and be ready to evacuate if needed, or start making all your arrangements now that you need to have in place.
And also to impress upon the minds of people who insist on climbing.
Yes, we still see persons going up to the summit. It's extremely dangerous. The last day, today we weren't able to go up on the volcano because of the increased activity. That's our safety reason. And if we are taking those precautions, so should you. So persons, please do not go up to the volcano. If you get caught up there and there's an explosive eruption, it's unlikely you're going to make it out. So we keep away from the volcano.
Thank you. Well, that's our program for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you on another edition next week, Wednesday, of Roundtable Talk. Good evening. Stay safe and keep listening to the alerts. Keep listening to all the advice and PSAs from N.E.M.O. and stay safe. Good evening.
Winner, Thierry Lockhart. I am urging you to practice social distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Avoid large gatherings, and if you have to stand in a line, make sure you are 3 feet apart from the other person. Get vaccinated today, protect yourself, and be responsible.
And I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right. Man and woman, let us join in the fight.
I am Hans John, the 2019 Vinci Ragasoka Monarch. I took the COVID-19 vaccine, and so should you. Let's be an example to others. Get vaccinated today and help control the spread of COVID-19.
Vaccinate if you want to eliminate the spread of the virus in our place, and do not procrastinate, but rather let us vaccinate. Get vaccinated today.
Erasmus Wiley, Glasgow, and I'm feeling perfectly fine. I just had the vaccine and I'm trying to encourage each and everyone to come and get the vaccine. It's important. Life goes on, but with this vaccine, it makes it even easier. Because of the field we are in, we are actually at the front. So each taxi driver should come and take this vaccine because trust me, it will be important to each and every one of us going forward.
Do not procrastinate, but rather let us vaccinate. Vaccinate.
I'm Pete, band leader of Lynx Mass Band, Band of the Year winner 2019. I'm urging you to practice proper hand washing to curb the spread of COVID-19. When you're able to wash your hands, use soap and water to clean your hands thoroughly. Get vaccinated today. Protect yourself and be responsible.
Listen to me and I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right. Man and woman, let us join in the fight.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, 100 Youth Empowerment Service interns and 150 temporary workers to be added to the government's service. U.S. and Vincentian legislators hold discussions on bilateral ties and COVID-19 response. And Vincentian healthcare workers among those in a Pan-American Health Organization World Health Organization survey on COVID-19 vaccine acceptance. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, March 26th is $220,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game. Hello and hi.
Hello everyone, I am Shakel Bob. I am a former Miss Pitani, a former Miss Rural SCG and Miss LCD contestant and runner-up. I'm a lawyer by profession but a pageant lover at heart. Do not let the negatives prey on your mind because a stitch in time saves 9. So, it's COVID vaccination time. Get vaccinated today to reduce the impact of COVID-19 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right.
On Friday, March 26th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $195,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $195,000.